It's Monday, January 1st. Happy New Year. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day. I mean, the first day of the year is always a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is the one and only Scott Pianowski. Scott, what's going on, buddy?
Happy New Year. We made it. 2024. Crazy. And we got a lot of fun stuff to break down. We still have a lot of exciting football that matters next week. You're celebrating a fantasy championship. Maybe you're licking your wounds. You get beat in the finals. That's okay. Play some DFS with us. Maybe put a prop down. My picks are sizzling. We're on a 22-6 heater. A lot of bowl games still to come. Yeah, football, man. January is going to be a great football month. Playoffs. Basically next week is playoff games for a lot of teams. Then we get the wild card round is different now, and you get the Monday games and everything. And yeah, what a time to be alive. What a time to be talking football. Let's do this.
Dude, you are so right. Fantasy season might be over, but I mean, we are in for an absolute treat of a week 18, and I think the postseason is going to be absolutely electric too. So if you need to be invested in it in some way, yeah, DFS, prop bets, whatever. But if you just love putting the eyeballs on some good football, I think we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up next week. But we got a lot of exciting stuff to talk about on this very show here, starting with it depends on how you look at it. An exciting Sunday night football game. Packers 33, Vikings 10. The Packers dominate this one, honestly, Scott, from start to finish. And now for the second straight season, the Packers will enter week 18 in a win-and-in scenario facing a plucky division rival.
Right. Yeah, I'm ready. We were talking a little bit pre-production. This Bears team reminds me of last year's Lions team, right? They found their footing late in the season. Nobody wants to play them. Quarterback's feeling it. Wide receivers feeling it. Defense is starting to play a little better. This defense is obviously a lot better than Detroit's ever has been. But we'll get to the Bears a little bit later in the show. The only buzzkill for Green Bay, because they got what they want, right? They're alive. They control their destiny. Jordan Love was very clean in this game. He throws 3 touchdowns. He runs in a touchdown. Jaden Reed, I know you've been very early to Jaden Reed and an adopter and a fan of his tape at Eastern Michigan?
Western. He started at Western Michigan, then Michigan State.
Right, yeah. I went to all the directional Michigan. So Michigan State, right, for sure. Yeah, Kirk Gibson and, all the great Michigan State receivers. He was having a terrific ball game, scores a couple of touchdowns, going to probably go well over 100 yards, has that chest injury pop up. Green Bay does the right thing. The game's not in jeopardy. Let's get Reed out of there. Let's play for another day. So that was a little bit of a buzzkill, but Love was really crisp. But Aaron Jones, a season where it's been hard to trust Aaron Jones. Is he healthy? Can he handle a heavy workload? Is this somebody, how many carries are they going to give to to A.J. Dillon, who looks about as good as Corey Dillon right now? Aaron Jones looked excellent tonight. And, 20 for 120 with a long of 25, just a very high success rate, a lot of, easy 7-8 yard runs. Yeah, this is just Green Bay's offense is finally coming around. And Matt LaFleur is a good coach. Every year it seems like there's a time where we bury the Packers or collectively, the collective we does it. And I know it hasn't been that pretty. They're only 8-8. I don't think anybody expects the Packers in the playoffs to go deep or anything, but this year was about figuring out if Jordan Love's the guy. It looks like he's the guy. It was about getting a young receiver room up to speed. And they're doing a good job with that. Despite Watson's missed so much time with injury, Reed has been in and out of the injury report. They haven't really had their personnel. We talked about earlier about Aaron Jones missing so much time. I think they've had a pretty good run out on offense, given usually they're not playing the guys they want to play.
Yeah, I mean, even Dontavian Wicks, who I think has looked really good this year, he's been on and off the field. Luke Musgrave's been on IR. Really, Romeo Doubs is the only guy I think who's been consistently on the field the whole way through. I mean, even in this game, they have Bo Melton, who they picked up off the Seahawks practice squad. He's another guy that was drafted, I think, in 22. He's the leading receiver here with 105 yards and a touchdown, which really does, I think, bring me back to Jordan Love. He was crisp is a great way to say this. And he was big game hunting here. He wasn't perfect in this game. There were some times where he really puts the ball in harm's way. He might have some turnover worthy throws from PFF or places that chart these type of things, but ends the game with 256 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt, 7.2% or 72.7% completion rating. And this is why I think it's so critical to keep talking about these Packers receivers, Scott, because Jordan Love looks like a guy. He looks like a guy who, Bo Melton has to take snaps. Well, Jordan Love's going to find him downfield. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to hunt. He's going to push this thing in the vertical aspects of the field. And getting the Packers receiver core right, like how this sorts out, is I think going to be critical to future seasons. I think all of these guys, whether we're talking Dobbs, whether we're talking Dontavian Wicks and Christian Watson and all these guys, like I think they're going to be like somewhere between useful to good players, maybe even very good players. But yeah, man, the guy for me is Jaden Reed. I mean, my heart was thumping the early part of this game. Like the first pass of the game, I believe Jordan Love tries to uncork a heater downfield to Jaden Reed, doesn't connect, but he gets him on the 33-yard touchdown on the post route. Reed runs a gorgeous route against man coverage and then just takes it the rest of the way for the 25-yard touchdown. This is a guy with a multifaceted skill set, Scott. Can win in the yak game. He's a great route runner. I think he still needs a little bit of work in the contested area, but to me, he looks like a guy that has superstar potential, somebody that I will be drafting like crazy next season. I know we're going to try to wean me off the second-year receiver drug, Scott, next year. That's our maybe one of our 24 New Year's resolutions, but I might take a little hit at the Jaden Reed, I'll say, next season.
Yeah, I'll be proactive on Reed also. And just to put a capper on Love, this is maybe my favorite stat of all. Last 6 games, he's taken 7 sacks. And this is a team that throws proactively. It's not like they're hiding Love. I mean, they're throwing 30, 35, 40 passes in a lot of these games. And that means he's confident. That means he's getting a clear picture of where the ball needs to go. It's coming out because sacks are mini turnovers. Drives end when a player gets sacked and your quarterback takes physical punishment. It's just such a bad play. It's such an underrated part of why offensive football doesn't work out, because the quarterback can't negotiate the pocket or can't make decisive. He doesn't know what open looks like in the NFL, doesn't make a crisp decision, whatever it was. Jordan Love, if you had watched the game tonight and had no knowledge of Jordan Love, you would have thought he was like a 3-year starter, 4-year starter. And granted, he's been in Green Bay forever because he had to wait behind Aaron Rodgers. And it's just hard, right? Favre, Rodgers, you're the next guy. There's a ton of expectation placed on you. But he goes down no matter what happens. I think the Bears actually could beat the Packers next week. I do believe all that hype I'm kind of giving Chicago. I think they're a dangerous team right now. But Green Bay needed to find out about Jordan Love. They found out.
Any quick thoughts on the Vikings before we leave? I mean, look, they bench Jaron Hall. They go back to Nick Mullins. Chris Collinsworth was calling it in the first half that they needed to go ahead and make that move. And I'm with him that, look, like Jaron Hall had just deer in the headlights kind of look for most of this game. I think, we know what Mullins is, right? We've talked about it on the show plenty of times here. The Vikings right now, they lose this game. According to the NFL.com playoff picture, they have a 3% chance to make the playoffs. It's a long road. This probably is the end of their season. And to me, Scott, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on them. To me, it's just like, this was a bit of a cursed season when you play 4 quarterbacks like this and you don't land on the Joe Flacco roulette wheel or whatever and end up like, oh, that's the 4th quarterback. We go to the postseason. You end up with a guy in Kevin O'Connell who I think probably has aged a little bit based on some of the guys he's rolled out there under center this year.
Yeah, the only Minnesota player you would have drafted this year and felt pretty good about it in hindsight is TJ Hawkinson. Jefferson gets hurt. That ruins his season. Obviously, the Cousins injury totally changes the infrastructure of the offense. Alexander Mattison was revealed to be the jaggiest of jags. Just a guy. Yeah. Ty Chandler had some moments, but he didn't do when we needed. I'll tell you what, I probably gave out pretty proactive. I know he didn't run well last week against Detroit. I called that an excused absence. I thought this would be a competitive game. 10 carries for 40 yards. You can't blame Chandler because his defense couldn't stop anybody, but he wasn't, a total washout. At least he got 64 total yards, but nothing close to a touchdown. So it was just one of the stories of the year, and we talk about it on the show, is the quarterbacks, when most teams are not prepared to play the backup quarterback more than a game here, a game there. And Minnesota, O'Connell he's like a guy at the track now. He's just, looking, does anybody have a scratch ticket? Did anybody hit the last exacta? He's just looking for tickets, man. He's looking for combinations. And today, the fact that he started Hall and benched Hall so quickly shows you that he really had no confidence in either guy. If he had confidence in Mullins, he would have started. If he had confidence in Hall, he would have left him in there. But that's what happens when you're playing your 3rd quarterback, your 4th quarterback. Josh Dobbs was the starter here for a hot minute. Do you think, this is going to be the big question, do you think they bring Kirk Cousins back next year? Because the problem with quarterbacks, with moving on from quarterbacks, is if you don't have an early pick, there's never a good alternative. We know the Bears are never going to trade Justin Fields in division. So And I've always kind of been a sympathizer for Cousins. I like Cousins. He's one of those guys. He's never going to be the MVP of the league. He's never going to be the cover boy or the Madden guy or whatever that. But he's good enough. He's good enough to get to the playoffs and maybe win a game. I don't know. Most teams would take something like that. I think they have. I think they kind of have to find a way to have Cousins come back.
I think they do too, and I hope they can find something that works for both sides, because I do think that coming into this year, their vision was probably to move on from Kirk Cousins, but then he played so well, and then the way this season unfolded, I think showed them that, hey, if we have a guy under center, we can be competitive in this division, which, by the way, the NFC North looks like it's set up pretty well between how the Lions look right now. We'll talk about them later. The way the Packers look with Jordan Love ascending and all these young guys. And, I mean, Scott's high as hell on the Bears. We'll see. They're probably going to have a new quarterback next year, so we'll see. But the NFC North looks might be competitive the next few years, but I think the Vikings, with competent play under center and the superstars that they have, like a Justin Jefferson and some of the ascending guys that maybe they have on offense, if they can nail just a few things, if they are able to retain Brian Flores, I think they could talk themselves into being competitive with a Kirk Cousins under center. I'm just curious that, like, what does Kirk want? Because he's been able to get whatever he wanted from a guaranteed money perspective. I wonder what they offer him, and then if he, in turn, because they can't franchise tag him, if he just says, okay, kick rocks, like, I want to go test the market, in that case, somebody will give him, I think, a pretty decent sized deal. But all right, that's the Vikings. I think that kind of says it all on them. We'll again, they're not completely out of it, but it does feel like their season is over. With that, let's move on to our headliners here from week 17, starting with Ravens 56, Dolphins 19. A surprising final score result, Scott. To me, this one stands out as the Ravens fully and completely showing that they have rebuilt their offense in a way that makes them a very different version than previous Ravens teams.
Congratulations, Lamar Jackson. You're no longer the MVP favorite. They can engrave it. They can bubble wrap it. They can ship it. He's actually won his second MVP before his second playoff game, but we'll see what they do in the playoffs. What a clean fantasy game for the Ravens too. I mean, Lamar's 18 to 21. He throws 5 touchdowns and he spreads them around. You needed Zay Flowers home. You needed Gus Edwards home. You needed Justice Hill home. Isaiah Likely, who's been so good since Mark Andrews got hurt. He only caught a couple of passes today, but they were both touchdowns. So, okay, maybe you needed Beckham. He didn't do it, but whatever. I mean, it's hard for everybody to score in a game like this, and those guys all did. I don't know what to do with Miami right now. No, Achane was needed to be the primary back, with Mostert unfortunately getting hurt. And thanks for all you did for our fantasy teams. Raheem Mostert, you had an unbelievable season. It's nice to see Achane get 18 touches. Nice to see him make a couple of splash plays. Quiet Tyreek Hill game. He was targeted liberally, of course. We know they didn't have Jalen Waddle. Man, we know the AFC East, they're going to have a championship game next week. Miami could be out of the playoffs like in 2 seconds. I don't know who they are, man. It feels like that 70-20. I know the NFL is always about ebb and flow and things change, but that 70-20 game, I'm not saying Miami's terrible or anything. I just don't know what they are. That 70-20 game feels like it was 3 years ago.
It feels forever ago. It also was kind of forever ago at this point. I mean, so long into the season. The Broncos had changed over identities multiple times. And, the stat was going around for a while, like, hey, since Jalen Ramsey got back, this Dolphins defense is number 1 in success rate. And then you look at the opponents since the bye week. It was the Raiders. It was the Jets. It was the Commanders. It was the Titans. It was the Jets again. And look, they beat Dallas last week. I think some of that was self-inflicted wounds by Dallas. Not even really things that Dallas can control either. It's just they're injured in critical places. In that game especially, they were injured in critical places. Offensive line, obviously up front, that's still a remaining issue for the Dallas Cowboys. But then you go against a real team like this, and we're all the way back with Miami where we've been before, which is, I'm with you that I don't know who they are, but I know that when they go against these tough teams, they just don't feel like they're in the same class. And I think some of that is, for all the crap that Brock Purdy gets about being, a game manager, a guy that can't like add to the playbook or whatever. I mean, I really think like Tua actually is kind of in that ballpark. He's not a guy that is a game, like the game manager stuff, whatever. I don't know if I want to call him a game manager, but he is limited in that he doesn't like add second reaction like plays. He tries to write checks that his arm can't cash. He did that several times against the Ravens today. Like, I think Tua is a very, 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 very good starting quarterback. Like, but I think that there are some there's a little, like even Brock Purdy, we'll talk about later, where he throws that touchdown to Brandon Ayuk, where he's getting off script. He's in creation mode. He's like telling Ayuk to get open and he makes the throw. Like even that stuff that like Tua is not adding to this offense. And he's not even like the first issue with this team. So I think that's a lot of just where I stand with Miami right now. You know, they'll go down as a really great fantasy offense to invest in with two guys, right? Like Tyreek and Raheem Mostert were great picks, obviously, especially Raheem Mostert, where you got him super late in drafts, but they didn't really give you a ton else this year from a fantasy perspective.
No, they didn't. Tua was maybe a par. He certainly wasn't a profit guy. And I think we all agree that the guy driving this offense is Tyreek Hill. And if Tyreek Hill were not available next week or in a playoff game, I think everybody would expect Miami to lose. Also, just a shout out to Lamar Jackson for having the perfect quarterback rating for the third time in his career. And I don't know why I like this. I just love that the perfect quarterback rating it's an older stat. It's not a new stat. It's not a fancy schmancy stat. I'm sure you and Dalton aren't talking about quarterback rating on Stat Nerd Wednesday, but I love that the perfect quarterback rating is 158.3. That's what they came up with. Okay, you nail it.
It's so random.
It's so random. I love that. I'm all about that, man. I'm all about the randomness. So congratulations, Lamar Jackson. You have 3 158.3s. You have 2 MVPs now. I'd like to see it in the playoffs. I know it's only been 4 games. He was hurt for that other game that they lost, but man, it looks right now, Baltimore, San Francisco look like a pretty likely matchup. I wish the NFL had never gone away from the 2-bye system. It's such an overwhelming advantage to have that first bye, and now Baltimore gets to sit back. Now, the key now is to be fresh when you come back, to be sure. I don't know how you do that because they're not going to be playing football. They probably won't take next week very seriously, and then they won't play the following week, which is good. We'll see how sharp they are the week after that when they play somebody who will come in with a head of steam. But Lamar, 18-21 against a team that was in the hunt to maybe get the number 1 seed. That is a perfect football game.
Just to put a pin on the Ravens here, you look back at their Week 17 game from last season, and the box score for the receiving room, it's Mark Andrews and like Isaiah Likely's in there a little bit too, but it's Demarcus Robinson with 1 catch for 9 yards. It's Deshaun Jackson, 1 catch for 9 yards. Those are their 2 most productive receivers. Week 17 of last year. You flash forward all the way to this year, you've got multiple playmakers that they're able to throw at the Miami Dolphins. Like Zay Flowers, it's maybe a busted coverage, but not only does he get wide open on his 75-yard touchdown, he runs after the catch. He makes a couple guys miss to get into the end zone. He has great angles, but again, he makes a couple guys miss to get in the end zone. Isaiah Likely gets in the end zone twice, once on a 35-yard catch where he adds that little extra juice after the catch and steamrolls in there. The second on just a gorgeous design leak route from Todd Monken. Todd Monken has been an awesome OC hire. And like these guys aren't feature players, they're not fantasy contributors really, but like Odell Beckham on the 33-yard catch in a tight contested go route situation that gets him in the 5-yard line. Rashad Bateman misses the 140-yard one earlier, but multiple third down, like critical chain moving routes. Justice Hill averages 12.8 yards per catch, 16 yards per rush attempt, and he makes a couple of explosive kick returns. Like, it's just crazy with not just, again, some of these new additions. Yeah, Flowers is a new addition. Beckham's a new addition. Bateman's healthy this year. Likely is another year in the system. But like, yeah, a lot of these guys have been around with this team before. It's a testament, I think, to great team building, but also just, again, great proof of concept of what you can do when you take a guy like Lamar Jackson and you freshen up the offensive environment around him. Just again, it was a exclamation mark today on what's been a full-scale transformation for Baltimore.
Yeah, let me piggyback on Flowers so we can get on to the rest of the slate. I think he has star potential. Any rookie who can be this good right away is impressive, but you just got to always wonder what the volume's going to be. He just eked over 100 targets this year. I think Lamar only has 1 game over 40 pass attempts. There's always going to be a lot of running to his game, to Baltimore's game, and then you hit the chunk plays downfield. I think it may be a case of Flowers is next year, and I'm going to want to draft him, but he's going to have to do it on 6, 7, 8 targets. Today he only had the 3, and that part of that was the game flow and everything. But he's never going to be like Amon-Ra St. Brown, where it's like, okay, you're off the bus. Yeah. Here's 12 targets. They're different types of receivers. You know that better than anybody. But I still want Zay Flowers on my team. Ideally, he's going to be my 2. in my room, or maybe if I get lucky, my 3. It's hard to know what ADPs are going to be, but I'd really like to pair him with a super high volume player who is, again, like a St. Brown Flowers start to my receiving room. I'd be so excited because Flowers is going to have the blow up games, but you have to do it with less volume. Where St. Brown, you just feel like, he could maybe end the season with 170 targets. They're different kinds of guys. They're different kind of milkshakes, but Zay Flowers is just fun. I thought for much of the San Francisco game, he was the best player on the field. And then today, blown coverage, whatever. Zay Flowers is going to be a nightmare to cover for the next 7-8 years.
Let's flip back to Saturday Night Football. Mm-hmm. Cowboys 20, Lions 19. Scott, don't know if you want to start this with how the game ended or something else, but go ahead, buddy. All you.
So I'm eating my breakfast today in a Greater Detroit eatery. And this family can't decide if they want a bagel or toast or hash browns. And so they're going to let them substitute in the bagel for the toast on, the husband's going to put it on the wife's order, and they're doing all this stuff. And I actually intercepted. I said, I think the bagel has to first report as eligible. And everybody started laughing because, everybody in Detroit watched that game. I actually went to a fast food place after the football game, and there was like 15 people in line because that's what everybody did in Michigan is watch this game. And we're talking a little bit about this beforehand. And look, I'm Michigan transplant for 20 years now. I did grow up in New England. That's where my heart is, but I have a soft spot for the local teams here. I was rooting for the Lions. Producer Colin is a big Cowboys fan. And so let's just be upfront about some stuff here. Brad Allen's crew botched it. The Lions did convert initially, but Dallas didn't know about the eligibility. They didn't cover somebody they didn't think was eligible. If that play goes off as it should have, Dallas is quasi prepared for what might happen, and maybe the guy's not open. And ultimately, the Cosmos gave us a do-over. I think Dan Campbell was crazy to go for it from the 7-yard line, but whatever, offsides. The Lions get another try. They didn't convert it. And just remember also, even if Detroit got one of the 2-point conversions worked, whether it's the trick play or it's the second chance, whatever, there's, I think, 23 seconds left. Dallas has timeouts left. And Brandon Aubrey's range is the parking lot. The guy has not missed all season, and he's doing the Justin Tucker thing where every one of his kicks is dead solid perfect. He's probably going to be the all-pro kicker, which is an incredible accomplishment when Justin Tucker's still around. But Aubrey's, the guy's perfect. Didn't even play college football. It's amazing. I don't know why he's not a rookie. Like the NFL doesn't count like Herschel Walker's USFL stats for Hall of Fame, but Brandon Aubrey's not a rookie because he played in another quasi-professional league. I don't understand any of that. But it was a football game. It was a good football game. It was a fun football game. If you had CeeDee Lamb, you probably were resting a little bit easier today because he went ham. St. Brown gets that late touchdown. He's just, every week he does it. Sam Laporta was so good on that final drive. He's going to be the tight end one this year as a rookie, which is an unbelievable and I think a little bit underreported story. Montgomery gets in the end zone. Dax had a great season. Brandon Cooks is somebody you're probably going to be drafting in playoff drafts. These are teams I like playing. A little bit lower scoring than we thought. We were talking it up as it might be one of the best pinball games of the year. It wasn't quite that. And then you even just had the crazy, like Mike McCarthy coaching like a maniac and Dan Campbell coaching like a maniac. This was a fun, if flawed football game of two teams that I can't wait to watch play. I don't think either team's going to the Super Bowl. At this point, I would be flabbergasted if the Niners didn't get to the Super Bowl. But I like watching the Cowboys, man. CeeDee Lamb is a grown-ass man. And isn't it cool? I guess he didn't want number 88 right away, but I love that in a league where all the cool kids want the small numbers. I'm glad we have one young star who's wearing an 80s number just to be different. And that legacy of the 88 number in Dallas is cool. It was really cool to see Jimmy Johnson get his day in the sun. And the Lions are a fun team, too. In fact, if these teams somehow can play again, I would love it. I think it would be a great rematch, and then we could all talk about Brad Allen and how lousy he is. But let's just be fair. The Lions could have won this game. It's not like if that play counted, all of a sudden the game was over. There's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, Scott, I'm with a lot of what you said there, and most importantly, that this was such a fun game. It was super entertaining. It wasn't as high scoring as we thought. I can't believe I lost money betting the over on this game and betting the under on Browns Jets on Thursday night. I did not. If you could have told me like anything I was sure of, I was sure this game would go over and I was sure that Browns Jets would go under. But Joe Flacco dunking on me like he's dunking on the rest of the league. But listen, what just kills me about the officiating thing, and I'm with you, that you can't, like I saw people saying, they got to go retroactively go back and award Detroit a win. No. Like, that's not how this works, because there's 27 seconds left, and you're so right, the Aubrey factor of it all. Like, I mean, they couldn't cover CeeDee Lamb all game. Okay, what's to make you think they're going to cover him on the final drive and like, shoot, even if he doesn't just rip you on a post route and he scores the touchdown on his own, he might get you to a point where Aubrey kicks a field goal, they get out of there, this game is over. So that's nonsense. The game is not over. But what just kills me about this is like you're blowing and I know, they missed a call on Hendershot before there, the tripping, the whole thing. Like that stuff happens, comes out in the wash, in my opinion. But what doesn't come out in the wash is like procedural errors like this. Just get it right. Take the time. Like, look at Taylor Decker when he's coming over to you. Like ESPN unleashing all these angles that make Brad Allen look even worse. But what just kills me about all this is that we're talking about freaking Brad Allen after the game. It's the last person I want to be talking about. Yeah, I want to be talking about Dan Campbell. Like, why didn't you just kick the extra point? Like, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, hey, Jared Goff hit the freaking throw on the third try at the 3-point conversion or 2-point conversion. Like, hit the throw, bro. I mean, he was this was one of those Jared Goff games that make you a little nervous. Like, let's talk about that as the Lions are heading to the postseason. Let's talk about the fact that CeeDee Lamb is, I mean, like, it's an easy thing to say he's graduated to the elite tier of receivers. I have people legitimately asking, like, should he be the number 1 dynasty ranked receiver right now? And like, I get the argument. I get the point. Like, these are the things I want to be talking about after a football game. A great football game, not the freaking officials.
Great football game. And, I was one of many who was criticizing McCarthy for his late game clock usage.
Oh, yeah.
But to be fair to McCarthy, Tony Pollard, 16 carries, 49 yards. I mean, if they handed it to Pollard, those plays were going to get swallowed up. They weren't going to work. Maybe they throw. I don't mind maybe the first aggressive pass. Maybe they went too far with it. But great football game. Let's talk about the players. Let's not talk about Brad Allen. Also, just props to some of the media for nailing this. Charles Robinson wrote a piece on it for Yahoo, and he covered all the angles and all the Scott Van Pelt stuff after the game. He's just on a different level. He's so freaking great. Unpacking it, asking all the right questions and some hard questions. It's frustrating when you see sketchy officiating and then you see the guy the ex-official who breaks down the officiating, who usually just says, oh, no, that's the right call. And they didn't get it wrong. And then Roger Goodell says it's fine and blah, blah, blah. But excited to see these teams in the playoffs. I will not draft Tony Pollard on any of my playoff rosters. A little frustrating that Jameson Williams had a long catch in this game and then got dinged up afterwards. Because he's certainly not ready to be a lead singer in this offense, but it would be nice to sprinkle him in. He'd be the guy who they could bring out. Oh, here's Jameson Williams. He'll sing a song with us. I'd just like to hear 1 or 2 songs from Jameson Williams every week. But it seems like something always goes wrong, even after something goes right for him. But I think both of these teams are going to win their first playoff game, and then we'll see what's left in the NFC after that. Again, I think the Niners, I'm pounding the table like a lot of people. This is not a hot take. I think the Niners have separated themselves, but the Lions and Cowboys are going to be playing a lot of football too.
Yeah, I'd love to see a rematch of this game. I mean, just a lot of fun players. And to Dallas's credit, I did not think they'd be holding Jahmyr Gibbs to 2.9 yards per carry. They did a good job. Now, Dave Montgomery got him for some runs, and Dallas was able to this is what they can do at home that they can't do on the road, seemingly, is they can build a lead so that they can not have just a team in a position where I thought Detroit was going to be handing like damn near 18 carries to both these running backs all day long. And they tried to do it, but to their credit, they were able to game plan around it and get Jahmyr Gibbs tackled in the backfield. That, I think, was a critical point to that.
Gibbs did lose one long run, but it was on a point of attack penalty where you can argue the infraction did contribute to the success of the play. Let me ask you this just in general. We'll hit on this quickly before we bounce. When teams have jagged home road splits, how do you handle it? I mean, we talk a lot about Detroit. Goff's great at home. Or maybe in this game, you think, well, Goff will be fine. It's indoors. You worry about him outdoors at Chicago or something like that. And the Bears defense has really come around. But I never know what to do with home road stuff. Because, do people just like the sight lines in the stadium? Do people just like their home cooking? Or are people happier around their family? It can be a lot of different things. I don't know. Teams cheating. People always thought for years that Belichick had he bugged the locker room or something, or the Patriots doing something. They shouldn't be winning at home as often as they are. Nothing's ever been proven on that. I don't know. The Cowboys are obviously a great home team, have been great on the road. Is there anything to be applied to that going forward?
Yeah, producer Colin makes a great point that for Dallas, it might be communication because Dak, and you saw him in this game, he loves to get up there and like move things around. He's probably one of the best pre-snap quarterbacks in the NFL and doesn't get enough credit for that. I mean, he's obviously had a great season this year and people have talked about it.
For sure.
he doesn't get enough credit, I think, in like mainstream media circles for being a great pre-snap quarterback. And I think that's just easier to do at home than it is on the road. Maybe, I mean, that's like one explanation, but I'm with you that I usually struggle to attribute like, what could it possibly be? I mean, Amari Cooper is one guy that's always had these outrageous home road splits. And it's like, I don't even know what to do with that. Like, especially because he's a receiver. Like, what, does he not run a routes hard on the road? No, I can tell you that's not true. So it's very bizarre.
Is there any chance Lamb could be wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in next year's draft class?
Oh, 100%. Why not? I mean, he could be. I could see that. I mean, I don't know. Justin Jefferson was the one consensus this year. I don't even know theoretically who's throwing him the ball next year.
Right. Chase coming off an injury March season. They lose Burrow as well. I mean, look, everybody's going to want CeeDee Lamb next year, and he was one of the right answers. We talk about any strategy works if you pick the right players. I think 6 of the top 20 receivers in ADP were smashes, and Lamb was very near the top of that list, where you would have taken him late first, early second, and tiptoeing around Stephon Diggs, tiptoeing around Garrett Wilson, some of those guys. You'd be fine if you took St. Brown, although Lamb was a better player. And we saw Dallas halfway through the season really steer into Lamb, right? He was the guy, he was the first half of the season, first third of the season. It was like, CeeDee Lamb's great. He could be greater. And they said, you know what? Yeah, he could be. And let's slam that pedal down to the metal, and let's target him. Let's pepper him 15 times off the bus and dare anybody to stop it. Certainly Detroit couldn't do it.
Next game up here, Cardinals 35, Eagles 31. My big take, Scott, from this game, and I'll see if you agree. The Eagles offense, I wouldn't come in here and say they're I'm going to criticize the Eagles offense. I mean, they were not perfect. Certainly there were some miscues. There's been miscues every week, but that's the big problem. Because of how bad this defense is, Scott, the Eagles offense has to be perfect. And like I said, they are far from a perfect unit. I mean, you look at Kyler Murray, 116.7 passer rating in this game, easily his best since returning to the NFL field in early November. 80.6 completion rate in week 17. He had gone under 67% in every single game this year. He'd been under 6.5 yards per attempt in all four of his previous games. 7.5 in this one. James Conner, the latest feature back to tear through the Eagles' usually stout front. I mean, this defense has fallen apart to the degree that they need the offense to be perfect, and they're just not perfect with the way Jalen Hurts is playing. I mean, A.J. Brown's cleared 80 yards just twice in his last 6 games. Devontae Smith leaves in a walking boot. I don't know, man. The Eagles are definitely in trouble.
This was flabbergasting result to me. There was that cool video of Kyler Murray walking into the stadium with Sidney Crosby, his hockey jersey, and maybe he was trolling the Eagles a little bit because obviously that's a Pittsburgh jersey. And I joked that it was the first positive video highlight from Kyler Murray since that great run at the end of the Atlanta game in his first game back. Our fearless editor, Jason Kabaka, was looking to make a quarterback trade. He wasn't happy with Geno Smith, and I talked him through it and thought that maybe Kyler Murray was a good guy to get like a month ago. And I'm sure Jason probably got eliminated and Kyler Murray probably had something to do with it. And he's probably like, next time, text Harmon or Barons, not Pianowski. But Kyler looked great today. And Arizona kicked their tail. 449 yards to 275, 32 first downs to 17.
Jeez.
I don't know how you could have come up with it that Kyler Murray was going to play. And granted, look, we know the Eagles defense has problems, but it's like, who's he throwing to? McBride's a good player. Hollywood Brown's out for the year. Greg Dortch is around. They have a bunch of guys playing 1 or 2 slots above where they should be on a normal depth chart. And I know the Cardinals won the game by 4 points. This felt like the Cardinals should have won by 2 touchdowns. The fact that the Eagles almost stole this game, it felt like a lot of their early season games where they weren't playing their best and somehow they'd win. And they were in line for the 1 seed. Jalen Hurts was the minus 150 MVP favorite. And I'm thinking, he's not having that great of a year. I know the tush push is great. I know A.J. Brown's uncoverable. I know the Eagles theoretically have an upside. We're never seeing it week to week. And so part of me, I have nothing against the Eagles. I like watching good players play good football. They have a lot of good players. But part of me feels like this is a little bit of a correction, that for all those games they didn't play that well and won, this is a game they should have lost, and they did lose it. And I don't know, it just feels like the right team is going to get the 1 seed in the NFC. And also, this was a tough game for fantasy. A lot of people thought Swift was in position to maybe have a big game. He had a good efficiency game, but didn't get the touches. And then the touchdowns 2 go to Julio Jones. I mean, if you needed A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith or even, Brown, Swift, or Smith, you need any of those guys to score touchdowns, and you're watching Julio Jones, who, if you told me he was 41, I'd believe it, score twice. Dallas Goedert's a good player, but you never expect him to be the primary target when they score a touchdown. Just a lot of things didn't fall your way for that. And just to see an Eagles team get less than 300 yards against a losing opponent, that's just shocking to me.
Yeah, no, you're right. This feels like a course correction game where early on this season, the Eagles' record's not good or is great. And I know they're not playing up to that record, but they have the most talented players, especially on offense. And now it just feels like that's just so far from enough at this point that I'm with you that the right team in the 49ers has got the NFC 1 seed, and I feel pretty confident about that. Next game up here, Rams 26, Giants 25. Scott, Rams narrowly escape. What do you got on this one?
Yeah, Kieran Williams, congratulations. I think you were the most important player in fantasy football this year. Not that you were the best, because Christian McCaffrey was, but to draft Christian McCaffrey, you needed an early pick. And you needed maybe to not be one of the Jefferson or Chase guys. Those guys got hurt. Bad luck there. Anybody could have had Williams. You just had to push in the chips. Anybody could have had Puka Nacua. You just had to push in the chips. We spent a lot of the first week reaction show trying to figure out what that meant. He went 10 for 119 or something like that. That first game was so interesting because Williams had 2 touchdowns, but he had like a 3.5 yards per carry. But that was the game where Cam Akers was like 21 carries, 23 yards or something like that. Akers was a road to nowhere. And if you went into your free agent period and you probably had to be aggressive with 2 hands on Nacua, maybe you had to go one-handed with Williams. And everybody, I don't buy this idea that, this is why 0 RB or hero RB is the right strategy because you got Williams. Anybody who plays fantasy knows every week if there's upside with a running back, that's a guy you have to consider. At the beginning of the year, everybody's got a full balance of fab. So anybody could have had, I feel like anybody could have had Williams, which is why it's pure. The guy who lucked into McCaffrey, I was a McCaffrey guy. Give me the 11th slot. I can't draft Christian McCaffrey. Anybody could have had Williams. Anybody could have had Nacua. All you needed was the conviction. And man, was I wrong about the Rams. I saw an old quarterback in Stafford. I saw an old receiver in Cup. I saw a coach I like, but a guy's been around in McVay. And I thought, okay, I know who the Rams are. Same old Rams. And I had no idea Nacua would do this. No idea Williams could be this player. And Williams, his season had a little bit of arcs, right? Because he comes out and he's really good. And then he gets hurt. And then a lot of people are saying, and I know you guys at Fantasy Football Live were pounding on this. I know Andy was saying it. You were saying it. Salvici was saying it. Get this guy. Stash this guy. Trade for this guy. The playoff schedule is so good. And yeah, the playoff schedule is so good. Williams just totally dunked on it, capping it with this 3-touchdown game. I don't know how this game is really competitive because the Giants don't have a lot going on right now. But it just feels cool that as much as I love McCaffrey, when McCaffrey's the player of the season, it just feels a little bit artificial because it's just not fair. Not everybody could have him. Anybody could have had the Rams. You just needed to see it a little bit more optimistically than other people. And I'll spoiler, I don't have any Williams. I don't have any Nacua. I do this for a living, but I had a lot of good teams this year. I don't think I won a championship in any of my primary leagues, and I have a decent volume. I'm going to win money this year. That's great. But I don't have any championships, and not seeing Williams' potential is a big reason why.
Rams clinch a playoff spot with this win. And from a fantasy perspective, Kyren Williams is running back 4. He's running back 2 in points per game. Because like you mentioned, the crazy thing about this is that he only played 12 games and he scored his 15th total touchdown in this game, which is wild. Puka Nacua ends up wide receiver 6 on the season. And I tell you what, this is so anecdotal, but at least definitely 3, maybe 4 times in the fantasy playoffs for me personally, I ran into like a Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua team. Like these guys are on both teams.
For sure.
I know several people that I talked to that showed me like their rosters and who they're facing. We're facing Kyren Williams and Puka Nacua teams, like both those guys on the same team. And I think the one thing I will take away from that is, one, if you can spot the value offense, and we tried, Scott, we tried to spot like who's the value offense in fantasy this year. We didn't get it right with the Pittsburgh Steelers, although we'll talk about them later on.
Get it right dominating the consolation bracket Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's be fair.
Well, if only Mason Rudolph, if he was only the quarterback all year long. But anyways, if you can spot the value offense in fantasy, you can be a big winner. But secondly, it pays to be aggressive in fab early. Like I know it's so hard after week 1 to just like that. I imagine I could go back and look, but no way I'm doing that. I'm not going to fact check this. I mean, I imagine that Puka Williams team had to blow their entire fab, like 50% on each guy in week one. And people probably laughed at him. You can find some really bad fantasy analyst tweets after week one of people like, oh, I feel bad. Literally people saying, I feel bad for the people blowing fab on Puka Nacua. I mean, it just paid off in spades. I cannot tell you how many times I ran into Puka Kyron Williams teams, and that had just proved to be an incredible pairing all year long.
And I was surprised. I thought Nacua would maintain strong relevance with Kupp back, but Nacua was. I thought Nacua basically. I thought he'd be a 2, or maybe even a lower end wide receiver 2 when Kupp came back, and it was more like a strong 2 or a lower end wide receiver 1 when Kupp came back. So even after Nacua was a fully formed and accepted fantasy player, he still outkicked my coverage. Also, just one other interesting note, and again, people be playing fantasy playoff formats and stuff like that. Although the Rams maintained an extremely narrow tree, only 6 guys were targeted, and one of them was Ronnie Rivers, who we don't even think about. Demarcus Robinson came into this game with a 4-game touchdown streak. He did not score a touchdown, but he goes 6 for 92 on 10 targets. He's officially a thing here. Somebody did ask me a Tyler Higbee question, and I feel sorry that I think I told them to play a different tight end. I'm hoping it was Jawan Johnson or somebody who was great. But Higbee had the 6 catches. I feel like Higbee could be invisible in any given week. But this is 5 straight weeks for Demarcus Robinson. He has the trust of McVay. He has the trust of Stafford. And I'm probably going to laugh to myself when I'm in some playoff draft and in the 5th round, I'm going to take Demarcus Robinson. But he's playing really good football right now.
Next game up here, Chiefs 25, Bengals 17. It wasn't easy for Kansas City. They struggled for a long time to really get going, but eventually Rashee Rice makes a 67-yard catch and run play. Isaiah Pacheco rips off a 100-yard outing here. They finally stopped throwing to MVS. I mean, dude, enough already with MVS. It's crazy. But here we are. The Chiefs managed to escape this one, and they win their 8th straight AFC West title.
Yeah, they won, but man, they look broken to me still. If you got Pacheco here this year, great season. Rice, we saw, I think a lot of people saw the Rice story. It's just a matter of them starting to trust him, the trajectory moving up, the snap share moving up, the trust with Mahomes, the trust with Andy Reid. Now he's their guy. That's great. I wish I wrote a piece on Travis Kelce this week, and I moved him down to tight end 3 for the week. And I said any of the top 5 guys, you would play Kittle over him, you would play Laporta over him. I'd be willing to discuss Njoku. I'd be willing to discuss Ingram. But I think after that, it was a little bit too far. And the right answer was like, you know what? Maybe you just don't play Kelce. Maybe he's just not healthy right now. He's 34. He looks at least that age. And I know they won, but I mean, congratulations. You got past Jake Browning. A lot of it was the defense. They sacked him a million times. Harrison Butker. I feel sorry for anybody. Bad beats. Anybody who lost because Harrison Butker made 27 field goals, I feel for you. But I don't think this Chiefs team, we said the same thing all over and over again, so I don't have to say it in any depth. I just don't think they have any upside. I think they could beat anybody. I just don't think they can string wins together over consecutive wins over good teams. That's what you're going to have to do in the playoffs. They have to fix it. So much help is needed. Rice is a complimentary good player. He's not a guy who drives an offense. I don't know how much longer Kelsey's going to play. Yeah. He's still talented. He's going to get by on guile now, right? I mean, the arc of an athlete is you come in, you're super athletic, you don't know what you're doing, and then you get to the middle of your career where you still have your athleticism, you know the angles, and then you get to the end of your career. Kevin McHale used to talk about this. At the end of your career, you know everything. You see every nuance, but your body can't do the stuff you could do 5 years ago, even though you see all the angles. And that's kind of where Kelce is now. He's a guile player. He's no longer a physically explosive player, and it's hard to see that.
It is. I wonder if this is the end for Kelce, because his brothers talked about retiring before too. I wonder if they'd, go out on the same year. I mean, it's at least a possibility. And in that case, this Chiefs team needs to fully reinvest in like figuring its pass catching group out. There was the headline coming into today's game where it's like the Chiefs are going to narrow down their use of receivers and they're not going to play so many guys. It's like, yeah, number one, that was a great idea. Like in September, I don't know why they entered the year throwing all of these guys out and like nobody could really get in a rhythm, but now they don't. It's great. You're going to play all the same guys and all the same guys aren't good except Rashee Rice. The only guy who's good here has number 4 on his chest and everybody else is a Jag or worse than a Jag. So I don't know. The Chiefs just are what they are. And I feel the same way with the Bengals. They are what they are too. Like 2024 just needs to come for the Bengals. By the time you're listening to this, it is 2024, but the 2024 season needs to come for the Bengals, and they just got to start over.
I feel bad for any managers who had Jamar Chase because you probably just had to accept that you'd play him. You know that Snead's having a hell of a season in the Kansas City in the secondary, and the defense has just been good, period. Jake Browning has been on a little bit of a heater, but he's a player with limitations, and I don't think Chase's 3 for 41 on 7 targets comes as any kind of a shock. It's just, I am not a start your studs no matter what guy, with very few exceptions. I just think Chase is just one of those guys. If he's in the uniform, you got to play him and live with it. And unfortunately, this was in the reasonable range of outcomes.
Next game up, Saints 23, Bucks 13. Scott, finally, I'm like, man, I was really wrong about Baker Mayfield, calling him the player I was wrong about the most coming into this year. 2 picks today. Rashad White also loses a fumble, and they lose to the Saints, man. I mean, you can't lose to the Saints if you win this game, you take the NFC South. They can still win the NFC South next week. New York Times, I think, gives them like a 56% chance to win the division. So again, it's just a lot of just what's going to happen next week. I believe the Bucks play the Panthers in week 18. So yeah, you should really be taking care of business against the Carolina Panthers. But again, Bucks really should have won this game. I don't feel as great about them right now as I did probably 24 hours ago.
For sure, they should have won. I mean, when you average 9.4 yards per attempt, as Tampa Bay did, and the Saints average 6.1 yards per attempt, you're supposed to win, but you can't turn the ball over like that. And man, I don't want to see Saints in the playoffs. I don't want to see the Falcons in the playoffs. I don't even want to see the Falcons play next week. If they just canceled the Falcons-Carolina game, I don't think anybody would notice or care. I still think Tampa Bay's the team here that has a little bit of juice. They were sloppy today. They didn't protect the ball. Baker took a couple of ill-timed sacks, and New Orleans got a lead, and then they sat on it and said, okay, here's 19 Jamal Williams carries that are going nowhere, but they're going to run the clock. And Kamara had a quiet game and
got hurt as well, left the game.
For sure. Yeah, that led to that as well. But which tells you how much I didn't want to watch this. Once the New Orleans got ahead, I'm like, okay, I'm checking out on this game. There are so many games at 1:00. You had to make choices, more choices than I wanted to make. At least the Saints did one thing we wanted. We needed tight end answers, with tight ends playing poorly, with tight ends getting hurt. TJ Hawkinson was unavailable, and Juwan Johnson was one of those guys, and he gets 12 targets, 8 for 90. He scores a touchdown for the 3rd straight game. And we know usually when you're streaming a tight end, it's about the touchdown equity. And if you could even get a little bit of volume mixed in there, that's great too. I mean, Juwan Johnson, that's 3 cherries. You got 12 targets, 9 catches, and a touchdown from Derek Carr on a day where Derek Carr throws for $197. If Juwan Johnson won your title for you, go buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah, for sure. Again, the Bucks should beat the Panthers in week 18. They should represent the NFC South in the playoffs. But what I'm definitely concerned about is, nobody expects the Bucks to make a Super Bowl run, but they go down 20-0, against the Saints. This defense is a problem. And when they're down 20-0 like that, that's not the offense. Like, it's not the offense that should be playing from behind like that. Like, Baker Mayfield and these guys can play well if they've got a lead. They can play in positive situations. This is a pretty unideal game script for them. But let's move on to the final game of the headliner section. Steelers 30, Seahawks 23. The Seahawks loss officially put the LA Rams into the playoffs. The Steelers have a very live chance. And Scott, look, I just said I was an idiot for being like, man, I was too hard on Baker Mayfield, but I was definitely too hard on Mason Rudolph. Like, I kind of just brushed off the whole Mason Rudolph thing. I was like, oh my God, fans, have some respect for yourself. You're chanting his name there in Pittsburgh. He's easily been the best Steelers quarterback this year. The latest embarrassing Kenny Pickett stat, because like I think I said to you on the preview show, the best part about every backup playing this year is we get a new embarrassing Kenny Pickett stat every single week. This one comes from his own team. The Underdog NFL account tweeted out the games with 250 plus passing yards this season. Mason Rudolph, 2 in 2 starts. Kenny Pickett, 1 in 12 starts. So there's your latest Kenny Pickett embarrassing stat. Mason Rudolph has a over 100 passer rating in back-to-back games. Look, again, Mason Rudolph is Mason Rudolph, but he is at least unlocking these guys. It's far too late for fantasy, obviously, but he's getting the best out of George Pickens. Deontay Johnson even had a couple of moments today, although he had one ultimate Deontay Johnson moment. And if you watch the game, you know what I'm talking about. I'm surprised by the Mason Rudolph thing.
And with him completing such a high percentage of his passes, getting 11.4 yards per attempt. Offense gets to stay on schedule. Both of the running backs come in. Najee Harris, 27 carries, 122 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Frank Schwab and I had to make a decision between Jalen Warren and Devin Singletary. And I said, Frank, don't worry. I've been wrong on Singletary 7 straight weeks. And then, of course, I told him that, man, let's play Singletary over Warren. Then Warren has his best game in, 2 months. 17 touches. He gets a touchdown. He's around 100 total yards. We've all liked Jalen Warren. Pickens doesn't get the touchdown, but you'll take, for what your expectations were of Pickens, 7 for 131 is perfectly reasonable, especially in a day where they only threw 24 passes. So, man, Mike Tomlin did it again, winning season. They're live for the playoffs. That's it, man. That's impressive. I mean, that to me is like I always say with fantasy, the skill is making the playoffs. The skill is the long term. And then there's so much variance in the playoffs and the stuff you can't control and injuries and bad calls and weather sometimes. Although we've run really clean for weather this year. I don't feel like the weather has usually there's like 1 week where weather ruins everything. That week did not happen this year. 1 week we got nervous about it. Most of the games were actually fine. But what are we going to do with Pickens and Deontay next year? That's the question. Or what are even the Steelers going to do? Right? I mean, I guess a new coordinator's coming in and all that. Are we going to talk ourselves into these guys again? We gave out a lot of Steeler pub before the season, and these guys won your consolation bracket for you. That is not a victory lap. That is not a win. We took the L on these guys a long time ago. Well, how do we spin it forward?
Tell me who's playing quarterback for him next year. I think that Mike Tomlin, who definitely got a lot of criticism at times this year, deservedly so, I think, ultimately ends up winning, has another winning record, whatever. He has to this year, I think, because he's going to be a little bit on the ropes, has to this offseason, like, bring in an offensive coordinator that comes from a progressive tree and is going to actually have new and innovative ideas. And you got to do something to quarterback, whether it's like, I mean, they're not going to be in position to draft somebody necessarily, but you can't just roll in with Kenny Pickett. And I don't think you can roll in with like Kenny Pickett and, even like Mason Rudolph battling in camp, or Kenny Pickett and insert Jacoby Brissett or something like that. You got to bring in like a Justin Fields type or somebody. I think
that's the name. A lot of people are going to want Fields, right? The Falcons, you would think, would hopefully want him because they have lousy quarterbacks and a lot of lousy other stuff. I would love to see Justin Fields on this, and I know Fields going to solve that sack problem. Yeah, but Fields and DJ Moore, man, they were cooking. I'm going to miss the Bears. I had no idea. The Chicago Bears were really fun in the second half of the year, but they're going to have an early pick. There's some guys that probably have higher ceilings than Justin Fields, so I get why they. And it just doesn't. If you're going to bring the other guy, you got to give the keys to the other guy. It doesn't make sense. This isn't like other positions where you can have the quarterback position unsettled. You need to have one person know he's the guy. You can't have it over his head, and you don't have a lot of times the cap room to make that fit long term anyway. So Fields on the Steelers, I would love that.
I think I'd be really in on George Pickens with Justin Fields behind center. I think that's a really nice pairing.
What is our postmortem on the Seahawks? Who Geno 8.8 yards per attempt and a touchdown. But I said in our preview that if you had told me before the season not to draft any Seahawks, I would be saying thank you right now. And I feel like look, Walker gets a touchdown, Metcalf 5 for 106. That's fine. Does Jackson Smith and Jigba, whenever he scores, is it impossible for him to get yardage and a touchdown in the same game? I feel like every time he gets a touchdown, there's no yardage attached to it. He almost feels like he didn't really have a full rookie season, but it's been an unusual year for the Seahawks. They lost their offensive line right away, and Geno kind of got the yips, and Drew Lock had that great touchdown pass against Philly. We'll never forget that, but I don't know what to make of the Seahawks team. I wish I didn't draft them aggressively, but I have Seahawks dotted on a bunch of like fifth place rosters. I guess that's a me problem. Where do you stand on all this?
Just good enough to not be good enough, man. I definitely come away very frustrated by this Seattle Seahawks season, and I wonder how they approach this offseason. I have no idea, because I mean, this was really we bring in some extra offensive juice with JSN and Zach Charbonnet. Their offensive line wasn't what we expected it to be. I mean, anytime Geno got any heat on him, things would just start falling apart. The defense was pretty bad, even though they got some decent performances out of a guy like Devin Witherspoon, Boye Mafe. I don't know, man. I definitely come away from this season being pretty frustrated by the Seattle Seahawks. All right, let's get a little rapid fire here and go through the rest of the games here in Week 17, starting with Bills 27, Patriots 21. Scott, what do we got on this one?
Neither team got to 300 yards. Buffalo is winning. And I know they look really good when they beat Dallas, but they're winning in a kind of an ugly way. Their offensive DVOA was actually better with Ken Dorsey than it's been with Joe Brady. I'd love to have the narrative that they switched coordinators, they fixed everything, but I feel like they switched coordinators, they're winning. But I'm wondering what the hell happened to Stephon Diggs. He goes down as a player who killed you. He's been kind of like the wide receiver version of Travis Kelce for the last 2 months. Stephon Diggs has one good fantasy game and 7 lousy ones. He's a good player. It's not all his fault. The Patriots do have a good defense. Again, neither team got the 300 yards in this game. But so, okay, we got it. AFC East Championship game. I still think Buffalo's really dangerous. But for them to be a team that can maybe upset a Baltimore, maybe represent the AFC in the tournament, they need to have an element to their down. And I realize they got Kincaid downfield for a big play today. And, we know Gabe Davis once a month will show up. 3 weeks a month won't. They can't live this way. They can't have Josh Allen throwing 5.6 yards per attempt and throwing for under 200 yards. You're going to have to outscore some teams in the playoffs. So I want to be in on this Buffalo thing. I think they're better than Miami, and yet their offense is really scaring me right now.
Yeah, Diggs is the ultimate season-long numbers lie, because if you just look right now, he's wide receiver 11 in fantasy. If you asked me the first half of the season, I was like, yeah, he's probably top 5 receiver. You asked me the last 5 weeks, he's unusable. So
he's been a right answer. He was a right answer for 2 months and a wrong answer for 2 months.
And it'd be like that sometimes, man. That's just
sure.
Fantasy football sometimes. But this was a pretty extreme case. Anything to say about the Patriots before we move it along? I mean, again, talk about a team that at one point in this game, Ezekiel Elliott eventually got to 39 yards. But at one point in this game, Bailey Zappi was the leading rusher and Kevin Harris was the leading receiver. Kevin Harris is their third running back. That's how this game goes.
Their receiving leaders, Harris, Jalen Reagor, who had the touchdown to start the game on the kickoff return, Mike Gesicki, Demario Douglas. Congratulations. Look, Patriot fans are happy. They covered. They moved up in draft position. It goes down as a win for the Patriots.
49ers 27, Commanders 10. This is a very take care of business type of win for the 49ers, Scott. We got a couple of I was happy because we got a lot of great plays from my boy Brandon Ayuk in this one. Him and Purdy were on fire, but again, very take care of business type of moment for the San Francisco 49ers, who clinched the NFC's top seed and will now have 2 weeks, week 18 and the first round bye, to get Christian McCaffrey healthy because he picked up a little bit of an injury here.
Yeah, I wish they took care of a little bit more business. So I always say in fantasy and football and all this stuff, I'm never going to get everything I want. I'm in seasonal leagues, I'm in best ball leagues, I'm in survivor pools, I'm in against the spread pools, I give out picks, I bet some props. And I always know some weeks, just some things are going to comically go bad. And for 2 months, I could not pick winners to save my life. And I'm like, I'm just going to have a losing season. I've accepted it. The last 5 weeks, I'm 22-6. That's going great. And I've bailed out that. But, my fantasy teams didn't run as well as I wanted to in the playoffs. I feel like that's just kind of the way it goes. It's you get something, you have to give something up. I didn't give it out as a pick, but we talked about it on the Thursday show. I thought the Niners over their team total was just, okay, how much money do you want to win? So I bought it down a little bit. I bought it down to 29.5, and I just watched the 49ers kind of play with their food. The game was over so early. Sam Howell had no chance of bringing Washington back. And there was a very late San Francisco possession where they're at the 1 or 2 yard line where a field goal is enough for me. But, Kyle Shanahan, what the heck? They're going to win no matter what they do. I'm not even saying either play is tactically correct because Washington's got no chance of coming back. But I would have preferred a field goal. 30 sounded pretty good to me. So to watch that die on the 1 yard line was frustrating. And I even thought, well, this is still not dead. Sam Howell could still do something to give me some points on defense. That did not happen. I felt a little bit frustrated. And for people in fantasy who you would have started Kittle, had a quiet game. Debo bails out with the touchdown. McCaffrey gets dinged up in this game. I feel like if they played this game 10 times, I really feel like the 49ers are going to have 45 points in 8 of those games. Unfortunately, today they hit the low end of their range and they still scored 27.
Yeah, normally I don't feel bad for people when their RB1 touches the ball 18 times and goes over 90 total yards. But when it's Christian McCaffrey and it's week 17, I do feel a little bit bad for the Christian McCaffrey.
No touchdown, too. I mean, which is just a rarity. Remember, it wasn't that long ago where they were trying to get him a touchdown late in the game to set a record or something like that because Christian McCaffrey was the most automatic touchdown scorer in the league. And some people may have lost their fantasy leagues. Not that McCaffrey played poorly, but because the Christian McCaffrey you pretty much had week in and week out did not show up today. And, again, if he's dinged up in a game that is decided, you should take him out. There's no reason he should be playing.
Next game up here, Texans 26, Titans 3. Another take care of business one here. You know, Will Levis starts this game. He ends up getting hurt. Ryan Tannehill comes in, throws 20 passes. You know, the Titans are the Titans, man. CJ Stroud comes back. It wasn't anything super electric from a fantasy perspective, but efficient. They win this game and they get out of there and keep their playoff hopes alive.
You know, Derrick Henry went nowhere in the first Houston matchup, and a lot of people were benching him today, and that was the right call. 12 for 42 on the ground. We know Derrick Henry isn't a pass catcher. He's only targeted once. It was sad to see Levis get dinged in this game. He only threw 6 passes. I mean, this game was over so early. Again, 1:00. The slate was bogged down with too many games. I just had to preserve resources and look at other stuff. It was so nice to have CJ Stroud back. Nico Collins, 7 for 80, no touchdown, but that's a win. You'll take that.
Yeah.
You know, Devin Singletary, again, he didn't outproduce Jalen Warren, but how bad can you ever feel when Devin Singletary gets 86 yards? We've said it most of the year. The Texans are ahead of schedule. They got the coach right. They got the quarterback right. They still have a chance to make the playoffs. I think their game next week, if they win, they have at least a wild card spot. So between them and the Colts, and then the Jaguars can still win the division if they win their game. So Houston, man, things are looking up. They were down bad. There were so many things: bad ownership, bad quarterback, scandal, coaches who were obviously one-year solutions, and all of a sudden they've gotten everything right now in a league where there's more wrong answers than right answers. Houston came up with 2 of the right answers, and Nico Collins, an old school third-year breakout. Right, we're teased. We're spoiled because receivers are good right away, or they're good in year 2. Nico was more of that slower developing Polaroid, but he showed he could be an alpha, and hopefully they'll get Tank Dell back healthy next year. I'm not sure what the status of his injury is, but this is going to be a fun team for a long time because the 2 places you got to be right, they were right.
Most critically, too, the trade up for Will Anderson, which was widely panned, was
great player.
Ended up giving him a total building block on the defensive side of the ball too. You mentioned those Colts. They're our next game up here, just for reference. By
the way, I love how you're just skipping teams. Like, I love how we didn't talk about Washington at all. I love we're not really going to talk about Tennessee. That's so smart.
Those teams need like a full postmortem, and we're not doing that here on the Week 17 recap show.
God love you. No, we got to make up some time, man. We gotta hit some green lights here.
Absolutely. Hey, there's a team coming up that scored 0 points here. We'll see how much time we spend on that particular operation. But again, you mentioned the Colts. According to the New York Times playoff simulator, they have a 52% chance to make the playoffs. The Texans, they give a 48% chance. So slight benefit to the Colts there.
50-50 game,
who win 23 over the Raiders 20. The Raiders officially eliminated from playoff contention. Antonio Pierce, we'll see if he ends up getting the final job. This is another game, Scott, where at least on the Raiders side, if you needed to sub in Zamir White, he had 20 carries. He also caught 5 balls. And Davante Adams, I mean, you said it before we started the show, wide range of outcomes on that guy.
The funny thing is, the one thing about the Raiders that didn't get home was their defense, which had been the top defense the 2 previous weeks and had been a top 10 defense in that 3rd week. And I thought, well, Gardner Minshew, and I'm a Gardner Minshew fan as much as you can be, but I thought, well, he'll throw a pick or 2. He'll take a couple of sacks. Yeah. He actually played about as clean of a game as Minshew ever could. But hey, look, Zamir White get over 100 total yards, which for a fill-in running back, that's as good as you could really expect. Adams was probably too good to bench, but you never know what the Raiders are going to do. I mean, that 3-0. Every Raider game doesn't really make sense. This is like one of the more normal games that they played since Pierce took over. Davante Adams gets 21 targets. I feel like they threw no passes last week. And then Davante Adams, if you'd asked me how many targets he was going to get, 21 would not come into my thinking. I probably would have said 7 or 8. So
Aiden O'Connell threw 21 passes on Christmas Day in the win over the Kansas City Chiefs.
3 quarters for 3 different quarters. He had no completions. and then today they just they throw it all over the yard. So good for them. I think it was Andy. You guys did your bold predictions, and Andy Behrens had Anthony Richardson, meant to be a bold prediction, as a top 3 quarterback next year. I love that. We talk about teams that got it right. Shane Steichen, the Colts, got it right. Richardson, it's hard to say he's the right answer because he just hasn't played enough, but he's certainly got a lot of plausible upside. Michael Pittman, okay game today, but he's spread his wings. Josh Downs has had moments. Jonathan Taylor can still play football. He was a good player today. Colts, again, they're probably a year ahead of schedule. This was not supposed to be a playoff season for Indy or Houston. One of those teams is going to win next week and go. And I cannot wait to see what Richardson, what Taylor, what Pittman, what Steichen do next year. They're going to be a really fun football. And this is the division, right? We're all like, oh, the AFC South, it's just everybody stinks and blah, 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 blah. Well, all of a sudden, Houston's looking up and Indianapolis is on the way up. And I mean, at least Jacksonville, you could see a story where they could fix things. They took a step back. They still might win the division. Trevor Lawrence is still very early. He's at the front nine of his career. They could get that going. So things should be cooking in the AFC South next year, and I'm here for it.
Next game up here, Scott Pianowski's Chicago Bears 37, Atlanta Falcons 17. Yeah, hey, look, they beat the your favorite Arthur Smith and the Falcons there.
Good.
But look, this was definitely I'm with you. I don't know if I'm going to miss the Bears, but Justin Fields, like, I'm interested in where he's going next year because I do think the Bears will start over. They'll take a quarterback first overall. DJ Moore will start over with another new quarterback, but Fields and Moore really connected this year, and Fields turned in another great season as a rusher.
The only thing and maybe I missed something, the Cole Kmet get, I guess, 13 snaps. That's what the problem was today. He didn't impact this game at all, which is too bad, but Herbert was very good. Fields was excellent. And DJ Moore, I know he was always a perception guy, and we loved him in Carolina. It's just like, let's give this guy not the Terry McLaurin run out, right? Let's get him some help. Let's get him some targets. Let's get him an offense that knows what they're doing with him. I think he's had a great season, and it's been a little bit obscured because Fields has had his ups and downs. Fields was hurt for a while. It seemed like nothing went right for the Bears for like a 5-week period. But man, they retooled the defense. They get Sweat. They're pushing teams around. I thought they were just a gift against the spread, -2.5. And just about everybody in America seemed to have Chicago today. And their defense was available to some people. Taylor Heineke had that Taylor Heineke experience. I think we talked about it earlier. I think Chicago has to go upside with that quarterback pick, which means Fields could be really fun on the Steelers, maybe fun on Atlanta with a new coach. There's a lot of first-round talent there. But if they bring him back, you know what? Great. I'm drafted DJ Moore next year. I'll make sure I'm in some salary cap formats. And for everybody who didn't get the players they want, get in a salary cap format. Then you can just throw your weight around and you'll get some of the guys you want. You won't get everybody you want, but at least you have a chance on every player. I'm going to be out throwing elbows for DJ Moore next year.
And if there's definitely a team that I don't want to do a postmortem on right now, it's the Atlanta Falcons. So we can keep it moving.
Yeah, nobody will miss you. You can cancel your game next week. Nobody will miss you. Period. And then it's not the players' fault. It's we all know what the problem is there, and I'll leave it at that.
Broncos 16, Chargers 9. Pretty predictable outcome here. Mm-hmm. Look, I mean, the Broncos were not saved by having Jarrett Stidham out there, although Stidham was solid. And he's not throwing a bunch of superstars there. He was solid. I don't know. This Scott, this feels very much like this is a game that happened type of contest.
Yeah, I mean, both teams playing with not their opening day starter for different reasons. Both teams don't have their alpha receiver. People are going to forget how great Keenan Allen was before he got hurt. I think people might forget how good Cortland Sutton was in a totally different way. With Sutton, it was all about the boundary plays and the touchdown deodorant. With Allen, it's about the 15, 16 targets off the bus. They were having awesome seasons, nowhere to be found. Little Jordan Humphrey scores a touchdown for the Broncos. Haven't helped anybody who needed like something from Judy or Brandon Johnson or whoever it was down this depth chart. And another game where Denver got ahead 13-3 and it felt like 30-3. Easton Stick did not play well in this game. Somebody named Alex Erickson, I should say, had 7 catches for 98 yards. I'm sure you've spent a lot of time on him in reception perception. I was disappointed. Yeah. Gerald Everett got the 9 targets I was kind of expecting. Denver's tight end coverage has been horrible all year. For Everett to only get 4 for 31 on that is a miss, a big disappointment. If somebody had a choice, I liked Everett, I liked Chig, and I liked Jawan Johnson as the tight end pickups, but Everett would have been my first choice. And that really stings if you had a choice between those guys because Johnson would have been ultimately the right answer. Disappointing that he couldn't do more against the Denver team that even got Mike Gesicki in the end zone last week. But two teams, I don't know. Obviously, new quarterback coming for the Broncos, a entirely new coaching staff, and a lot of personnel is going to change for the Chargers. So I feel like to really preview these teams next year, we need to see what comes in because there's going to be a ton of changes in both organizations.
Just to put a bow on that receiver point, Keenan Allen in 13 games finishes the fantasy season as wide receiver 8, and Cortland Sutton in 15 games finishes as wide receiver 31. maybe that doesn't sound impressive, the wide receiver 31, but he was FREE free basically in every draft. I mean, nobody wanted to draft him. Made the point a lot over the summer, like the intense gap between Judy and Sutton's ADP, which, by the way, fantasy like consensus seems to get wrong every single year. Like when Sutton goes first, Judy's the value. When Judy goes first, Sutton's the value. I don't know if both those guys are on this team next year. Again,
I think you were right on Judy. I got a little bit fooled, and this feels like such a dumb process now. About Judy played well at the end of last year and first round pedigree. You were saying before the season, no, I don't want Jerry Judy, and I've maybe he could land in such a perfect situation that would work out, and maybe if he, I don't know, somehow he ends up on the Chiefs, and somehow Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes whisper the right things to him, and Jerry Judy is a different football player than the guy I've seen. Quite frankly, I think he's wasting his ability, and I'm not going to. If Jerry Judy beats me next year, if Jerry Judy winds up somewhere and finds it and is wide receiver 11 is the right answer, well, you know what? Good for you. You beat me when I wanted you and you beat me when I didn't, but I don't want you.
Final game up here. I don't want the Carolina Panthers, but they did partake in this game. Jaguars 26, Panthers
That's
0.
A rumor. That's debatable if they actually took part in this game.
Well, their owner took part throwing a drink at a Jaguars fan at the end of the game. That's how down bad the Carolina Panthers are. If you haven't seen the video of David Tepper on Twitter, make sure you check it out. You'll be able to find it. It was everywhere this afternoon. I mean, the Panthers are a joke. The Jaguars get out of this game. They get a big play from Travis Etienne on the ground.
Yep.
If you survive Travis Etienne going cold there at the end of the fantasy season, you got 100 yards on the ground, 64-yard long run, and 2 scores. I don't know how much to take away from this game because it's the Panthers.
Yeah, Travis Etienne just won a lot of people their 3rd place or 5th place championships, which is fine. They usually pay money too. Yeah. I ask you, Matt Harmon, do you know how many offensive yards the Panthers had today in a National Football League game?
It's not under 200. It's under
200. Well under 200. They had 124. That's almost impossible for a game that had no weather concerns. How does that even happen?
Yeah, because for the people at home, Bryce Young threw for 112 yards, but lost 45 yards on 6 sacks, and Chuba Hubbard was the leading rusher for 45 yards. So yeah, you do the math there.
Where are we on Calvin Ridley? What are we going to do with him next year?
Well, we'll see if he re-signs with this team. He's a free agent.
Right, that's right.
There's draft pick compensation tied to him. If they sign him to a long-term extension, they send a second-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons. So that, I think, is up for debate whether they'd want to do that. I think they could franchise tag him, and then I don't think that means they send the second-round pick. So I don't know. We'll see. I think if you just view him without all the hype and the expectations, like he was fine this year. He just got way overhyped in fantasy.
I suspect Etienne's probably a 2nd-round pick. You gonna pay that?
I don't know, man. I'm sketched out by the way this Jaguar season has ended. Just don't think the play caller change to Press Taylor was good. Think they left a lot of meat on the bone from an offensive perspective. Like they don't have great players, but they have good players. Like Calvin Ridley is a good player. Christian Kirk is a good player. Evan Ingram's a good player. Zay Jones is not a good player. Like I don't need Zay Jones to be the key to your passing game. Like, oh no, Zay Jones is not out there. What are we going to do? Like, I think they got to add some stuff in the receiver room, and they got to get some things down conceptually, and they need a second pitch in the back. I mean, Tank Bigsby was a disaster pick this year. So I am very right now sketched out by all Jaguars stuff, but give me like an offseason, I might feel differently about it.
And also, I just know the way structurally you and I usually build our teams. 2nd round is almost always a wide receiver round. Unfortunately, I think of all the receivers that hit in the 2nd round this year who are never going to get there again. Like, I hope everybody enjoyed the last year. You get St. Brown in the 2nd round. That's never happening again. But there will be, when ETN comes up, when ETN has percolated to the top of the running back board, I'm just going to look at a receiver and say, okay, well, Garrett Wilson, I'm forgiving you.
I was going to say, Scott, you and I are both drafting Garrett Wilson.
Or even Chris Olave, man. I know he's good. I know it's going to happen for him. Or some version of that player. We know it's a really good receiver class coming into the draft too, although those guys won't go that early. But next year, this year, I think here's just a cap on the whole season. This season was about injuries at quarterback. an underperformance of quarterback. And even the quarterbacks who lasted the whole season, Mahomes had a down year and Tua was just okay. Next year, I got to figure there's fewer quarterback injuries. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll change a couple of things in the rules, but they can't really make the game much safer. I think this year we just get a really bad run out with the quarterbacks. And next year we'll have cleaner quarterback play. Also, I think Warren Sharp was talking about they were calling some ticky-tack procedural penalties in the first half of the season, and that's why games were coming in under at a crazy rate. He wrote an article about it, and coincidentally or not, those penalties have started to kind of taper off a little bit. In the second half of the year, scoring's made a little bit of a comeback. We're going to have more scoring next year. We're going to have better quarterback play next year. And as a result, you follow Matt Harmon, you read RP, you read James Coe, you read all that stuff. Get your notes ready. Get your case ready, because I want you, and we said it this year, and I know anything works, you pick the right players. Anything doesn't work if you don't. But I still think next year I want you coming out with one of the best wide receiver rooms in your league. I think it was a good strategy this year, or at least a workable strategy. It was this year felt wonkier than usual. Every season's weird. I get it. I think this year had a little bit more variance and a little bit more chop to it. I still want you boning. I want you reading all that RP stuff. I want you knowing all the receivers in the draft. And I want you to say, hey, Matt, hey, Scott, look at my receivers. Look who my 3 is. Look who my 4 is. Look who my 5 is. I want you to dominate that position at your draft next year.
Hey, an endorsement for big receiver and hitting the receiver position hard. I think that is a good a spot as any to wrap it up here for the 2023 fantasy season. And our final Sunday night recap. That's going to do it, buddy. Hell of a year. Hell of a show.
It was fun. Thanks for you for having me. Thanks for producer Colin for being the unsung hero of the show. You don't see him. You don't hear him as much as you could. I wish he would insert his voice more often, but all of our Cowboy tastes come straight from Colin because he follows them snap per snap, and just all the production team here. Thanks for having me, man. It's so much fun to be a part of the Yahoo team, and let's run it back next year.
Yeah, I'm not going to give Colin that much credit. I've got. I've got some unique Cowboys thoughts.
Just write it down on the social media. Colin Brennan, Pianowski underrated, Harmon overrated.
Yeah, well, listen. Anybody at Yahoo Sports wants me to cape up for what a great job he does. I'll give him credit for that. Cowboys takes though, I'll say we use like 20%, 35%. But on that note, that's a pretty good percentage. Hopefully all of you came away with a great win percentage in your fantasy season. Thank you so much for sticking with us all throughout this year. It's been so fun. I know I speak for Scott. I speak for everybody on the show. It's been a fun year for the pod. Again, this is our final Sunday night recap show. Thank you for everybody. I mean, on a serious note, thank you to Scott and Colin for chipping in serious hard work on these Sunday shows to make them as good as they could be, to include Sunday Night Football, to really bust their ass, again, to, I think, make this a great product. For all of you out there that support and listen to the show, thank you as well. We could not be more grateful to you as the 2023 year comes to an end. On that note, next time you hear from us, we'll be on Wednesday. No podcast. I'm not podcasting on New Year's Day. We'll take the day. But on Wednesday, Andy Behrens and I are going to put a bow on the 2023 fantasy football season with things we care the most about from this year, secret list style. So Behrens is going to be fired up. Until then, we're out.